I sat down to write this episode of Muttday Morning News, but all my initial ideas fit better into pet play, so I guess another one of those is coming sometime this week, ideally. I'm mostly joking, but so much of the news this week was about games, technology, culture, and looking through my potential show notes, really, it was starting to look a bit like that's all there was. Well, besides the stuff that I didn't think I could make funny, and the stuff that developed since I started writing the script, but hey. Thankfully, I dug deep and found some other news to talk about, which is to say, I actually picked up most of those vaguely positive non-culture stories that I'd briefly looked at, turned them over and revealed, oh, they're actually running cover for awful, much more important news. Oops. I'll give you examples in a minute, but a few stories I won't be fully covering this week. It's Trans Awareness Week, so please remember to support trans creatives while you're briefly aware of us. And heads up, the AI bubble is getting dangerously close to popping. Last week, the remarkably credulous SoftBank pulled out their investments in NVIDIA's AI cruft. If you're not aware, the whole AI bubble right now is basically a bunch of companies shifting their own money around between each other, usually using NVIDIA as an intermediary, which is why it's also kind of notable that last night, tech billionaire Peter Thiel dumped his entire NVIDIA stake as well, and gutted his Tesla holdings. If that second bit's a little confusing, it's because Musk has been using Tesla's inflated stock price to carry X, Neuralink, XAI, SpaceX, the Boring Company, and basically all of his privately held business interests that increasingly have negative profit margins. Oh, and the Harvard Crimson broke another story last night. They uncovered who the student Larry Summers, a longtime Harvard professor and one-time Harvard president, was asking Jeffrey Epstein for tips on seducing back in 2018 and 2019. A decade after Epstein's first conviction for sex crimes against children. She was, needless to say, an undergraduate student less than a third the married man's age, and was referred to in the emails by the codename Peril, referencing the racist and wildly xenophobic concept of yellow peril, as the young woman in question is Chinese. Second fun fact. Last week on the 10th, Summers was calling for an investigation into the Harvard Crimson after the reporting on the university's massive doctoral program cuts. Oof. And welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Fen, and now let's get to some news. Yeah, that wasn't even the real news yet. I promised you examples of those less than fun stories with generally positive headlines that when you turn them over, realize that they're kind of awful and are running cover for something else. Well, would you believe that 2 of them had something to do with the Catholic Church? Well, it was actually 3, sorry. On November 15th, Pope Leo returned 62 artifacts to the Indigenous peoples of Canada. The artifacts were mostly those stolen by missionaries aiding in the Canadian government's forced assimilation program, now more accurately described as a cultural genocide, where missionaries confiscated the objects and icons of native religions, while the government outlawed their practice, languages, and cultures, all while additionally forcing them off ancestral lands. And let's not forget that both worked together in the monuments to the bedrock deep Christian legacy of child abuse, rape, and murder, better known as the residential school system. Yeah, this is one of the positive stories, because after 100 years, Pope Leo returned 62 artifacts the church stole and sent as gifts to Pope Pius in 1925. And just to be clear, while this is about the Catholic Church's history in Canada, they did the same, though by different names, in every colonial state on Earth that they were party to, including the USA. The other bit of news running cover for a different horrible story related to the Catholic Church, well, this story was circulating about 4 trans women having lunch with the Pope. It sounded good, so I decided to do a bit of digging, which was mildly more annoying when I learned that this article misspelled the only named woman who'd be at this lunch with Leo. I'll note that while the late Pope Francis was very much still a Catholic. He was surprisingly queer-favoring. His Chicago-born replacement, not so much. Shortly after his ascension to Pope in May, Leo was still spouting that marriage is between a man and a woman crap, before maintaining a case-by-case basis policy of blessing gay marriages that Francis had established, while making it clear that blessings do not make them marriages in the eyes of the Catholic Church. In truth, the actual lunch, the annual lunch for the poor, for a global church with an income that even try-hard Wikipedia editors had to throw up their hands and declare incalculable, having only a single annual lunch for the poor seems pretty nodding shameless to this mutt. Anyway, as I was saying, the lunch for the poor actually had 48 trans women in attendance, rather in keeping with our history of being society's untouchables only allowed in as decoration so the incalculably wealthy may display their largesse and piety, though unlike the events hosted by Francis in 2023 and 2024, where trans women were selected to sit at the then Pope's table to converse with him on issues they faced, Leo excluded all of the trans women. Two people familiar with the event's organization told the Washington Post, under conditions of anonymity, that the exclusion was intentional, though not overtly explained. While the Vatican PR cardinal for the event claimed the seats were assigned to those who'd attended an earlier mass, and that all trans women had merely been late to that. Which sounds a lot like, we gave away the tickets before you got here totally accidentally, and you can't be mad, preemptive, plausible deniability to this mutt. Doubly so when I point out that these 48 trans women were, the kind of Catholics who'd all met Pope Francis multiple times through 2023 and 24. It feels a bit more overt when I bring up that the trans author who sparked all of this off, whose name them repeatedly misspelled, Alicia Nobile, was a friend of Pope Francis and said, quote, "He always wanted the front row for us transgender women. Every Wednesday during the audience, he would stop by to greet us, even when he was already suffering." Before the lunch, Nobile was asked if there was anything she'd like to say to Leo. She replied, "I would say to him, I'm Francis's friend. Do you want to be the father to all of us transgender women?" The closest Pope Francis's friend was able to get to Leo was to give him a letter from the trans community to which he smiled. That is a quote. I'm going to be honest, girly pup. Good on you all for trying, but it's the Catholic Church. Hey, remember how I said those two good headlines were running cover for the bad one, and then kind of proved that even the headlines were a bit bullish on their good content? Cool. So the even worse thing is that back on November 12th, U.S. bishops officially banned Catholic hospitals from performing trans healthcare. The framing is that only gender-affirming care is being banned. But first, that's healthcare banned on the basis of who it's being given to, not its necessity, danger, or use. Second, that's not how these things work, and we all know it. The Catholic Church did the same thing when they banned Catholic hospitals from providing abortions. They also stopped doing hysterectomies or any other form of tube tying, blocked use of drugs and procedures that might cause abortions, even in cases where the parent would die otherwise, leading to myriad preventable deaths at the church's hands. The stigma around treating trans women is so pervasive that doctors still demand that we go off estrogen before surgeries, despite a recent study showing that estrogen alone has no effect on our risk factors for cardiovascular issues. Only a single kind of estrogen that was used briefly in the 80s did that to cis and trans women, but rather because, like our cis sisters, doctors do not take the concerns and symptoms of women, cis or trans, seriously, especially around pain and heart health. We, and cis women, are more likely to die from heart-related issues, not because of estrogen, but because they are more likely to be ignored by doctors. And this policy reinforces exactly that by treating the simplest part of our care hormones, which are available over the counter in many countries and at most require a 6-month blood level check as taboo, the rest of our care is just as unworkable as it would require affirming us. In some states, including my own, this means upward of 25% of hospital beds are simply no longer an option to trans people. This in the same week 8 Democrats gave up the only leverage they had to defend the ACA tax subsidies, whose expiration are leading to ACA plans spiraling out of reach of many this year. In addition, I had to bring that up since I know a bunch of you wish I'd just do a story about how Fetterman fell and got hospitalized, and oh, everyone's hoping that he'll show up as a wild lefty again. But sorry, no, I'm the one who has to remind you that he's never been a wild lefty. He's been pulling shotguns on black joggers since 2013, and that wasn't even the beginning of his bullcrap. That's just the first thing that most people are aware of. No, I'm the mutt that gets to remind you that in return for a promise to follow the law and pay federal employees for their furloughed work. Actually, quick aside, show of hands. Y'all do know what we weirdo reportery folk mean when we say furloughed work, right? Because while the government was shut down, many federal government jobs actually still need to get done. Not the nice important ones like giving people money for SNAP, but things like air traffic controllers. Those jobs were furloughed, which is to say, they were still expected to work, often just as much, sometimes more, but now sans pay. And because they're federal jobs, they're even blocked from striking in most meaningful ways. So yeah, those 8 Dems caved on the ACA tax credits for a promise to pay the folks who'd been trying to keep more planes from falling out of the damn sky, who Trump was legally obliged to pay anyway, a future vote on the ACA tax credits, which they no longer have leverage on, the recriminalization of CBD products, and the Dems agreed to yet another way of punishing USians for having even the remotest faith in them. They agreed to kill existing rules that prevent foodborne illnesses in restaurants and farms, as well as blocking development of new rules, specifically affecting more processed foods. In the year of our mutt 2025, when the Trump administration has halted tracking on 6 of 8 foodborne illnesses, the year foodborne illness deaths have doubled. When food recalls due to E. coli, listeria, and salmonella alone increased by 41%, the Democrats, including Fetterman, agreed to make USian food even less safe. In addition to every other concession I've already said to fund Trump's federal government for 2 months. 2 fucking months. Did I mention he's already talking about kicking everyone off Snap and making them reapply? Almost like he really just wanted to make 42 million Americans suffer and starve or something. Okay, back to the at least moderately risible news. Adelita Grivalva was finally sworn in after 7 weeks, and the weird process of voting to unseal the Epstein files has begun. Not only that, but because of it, another 10,000 or so documents from them, mostly emails, dropped into the public record and reaffirmed or proved a whole bunch of things we kind of already knew, since almost all of Epstein's abuses were generally considered the worst kept secrets in everywhere for decades. Like that the New York Times knew they had a reporter in Epstein's pocket who tipped him off about investigations and was offered, and according to the emails, accepted, pictures of then-candidate Trump in Epstein's kitchen with girls in bikinis. Given Epstein's entirely confirmed crimes, yes, one can assume they were in fact minors. That bit was notable as Trump has since often proclaimed his only connection to the child sex predator was that the man had stayed at one of the dictator's garish hotels. Another one that came up was this email from Maxwell, currently being waited on hand and foot, apparently much to the chagrin of her guards, and the late Epstein, when she said, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim," redacted as part of the procedures, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Reminder, all of Maxwell and Epstein's victims were children they raped, abused, and prostituted. There you go, spelled out plainly. Even with the redaction, the woman found guilty of grooming children into lives of sex slavery for Epstein just said that one of her victims spent hours in her house with the dictator of this country, who's openly admitted to sexually harassing and assaulting teenagers in beauty contests he judged and ran. Donald's a pedo, and it's really that simple. Of course, the dumber one is probably this email when Jeffrey Epstein's brother Mark asked if Putin had the picture of Trump blowing Bubba, a nickname often used for Bill Clinton. The natural joke here is that the 2016 elections were between two people who'd had oral sex with Bill Clinton, but I'll be honest, if the Clintons' marriage survived Bill coercively raping an intern, their marriage probably isn't terribly sex-based, or is only sex-based. And yes, for the right-wingers who seem to seek out my work to make themselves angry, actual lefties want to see everyone who diddled kids, including and especially Democrats who dared to claim they stood for the marginalized, strung up. But then that's what makes us lefties, not liberals or Democrats, for you see, scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds. I should make right-wing infighting a regular part of this show, shouldn't I? They're always the most fun topics to bring up, because the only person getting hurt by them suck. And they can't even blame it on the lefties. Of course, I said that about Kirk getting shot by, allegedly, a dude half-broiled in the Groiper sauce, and they still managed to try and blame that on a trans girl, but since I brought him up, the late Charlie Kirk and his wife, Erika Kirk, are being transvestigated. If you've never heard that term, I suspect you have a much more comfortable time of it than me lately. Would you consider supporting my Patreon for as little as $1 a month? But also, it means people trying to phrenology their way into proving someone is trans. Basically, you know how the whole lizard people control the world, or Hollywood, or pick an industry, is just an obfuscation of the secret hidden Jews control the world, or the 20-teens version globalists. And if you didn't know those were dog whistles for anti-Semitism, well, I guess now you do. Well, transvestigation comes from the same conspiracy-brained soup. The idea that the oppressed minority have secretly blended into the upper echelons of societal power and are enacting their evil whims from the top down. They must be revealed and exposed, otherwise all of Donald's great policies will keep accidentally hurting only his supporters. Yeah, it's bullshit. For context, these folks are convinced that most pageant winners, which Erika Kirk was, are trans women. They also think most models, especially Victoria's Secret models, are trans women. Okay, girls, look, my tuck game is damn good on account of being pretty damn tiny, and I've literally done modeling and acting. You cannot pull off a lot of Victoria's Secret panties without a bulge. I swear some of them feel like they're intentionally highlighting it. Then again, these weirdos also think you can get bottom surgery in an outpatient procedure instead of paying tens of thousands and getting in the back of a fairly long line with months of recovery after, so they're pretty much divorced from reality at this point. The best part of transvestigation is that you can actually just copy the best answer ever to get out of it, because Lady Gaga already gave it back in 2011 to CNN. When asked if she had a penis, in the most pathetic terms that were uncomfortable with saying the word penis.
That rumor were that you had a male appendage, that you were a hermaphrodite, and you joked about it on the stage last night.
Maybe I do.
But it's interesting.
Would it be so terrible?
But it's interesting, a lot of artists would immediately put out some sort of a statement saying this is absolutely not true. You have fun with it.
Why the hell am I going to waste my time and give a press release about whether or not I have a penis? My fans don't care, and neither do I.
Transvestigation is literally only a problem for the transvestigated if they see being trans as shameful, rather than one of the myriad things that any human being can just be, you know, like autistic, or any of the other things they inherently hate. Okay, that's also a problem because you have a bunch of brain-boiled TERFs fixated on you, and that's fundamentally dangerous, but their actual goal only harms you if you're in the same boat as them, which feels like this is still on you then. How about something entirely unsubstantiated, but in a similar vein? Let me be a catty bitch for 1 minute. I did 3 stories on the Catholic Church this week. There's a rumor going around, again, entirely unsubstantiated. No, body language analysts do not count. They're going off vibes and trying to pretend they're doing some sort of scientific shenanigans. Own your gut feelings for what they are, y'all. The rumor is that JD Vance and Erika Kirk are having an affair, largely based off some pictures and comments Kirk made at a Turning Point event in Mississippi last month. The nice girl lib thing to do here would be to remind you, again, unsubstantiated, and to feel pity for Vance's life. Usha, I guess I already did that first part, but since I'm not a nice girl lib, I'll remind you she's still married to him, supporting everything he does. She is a much more successful lawyer than he ever was, and I don't mean that as a compliment. And she clerked for 2 of the Supreme Court justices, currently throwing legal precedents out the window to support Trump's cruelty. Also, it's weird to me that everyone always assumes affairs instead of polyamory. Didn't I just point out how Bill and Hillary's marriage survived him coercively raping an intern? Clearly politicians and oligarchs aren't really that into monogamy. Oh, right, and all the Epstein stuff that keeps proving that too. Don't forget about that. The other bit of right-wing infighting is equally funny if it didn't reinforce that Dems really just want to be the right-wing party and drop all pretense, as Labor has done. If bending over backwards to cater to Musk, even while hashtag Tesla takedown keeps rolling through, hadn't already proved that. Marjorie Taylor Greene has picked up the mantle Charlie Kirk rather suddenly vacated, the right-winger pushing for the release of the Epstein files. Lest you think it's out of the goodness of her heart, or some such tripe. Nah, she's just a bit more like Nick Fuentes than Kirk, which is to say, a rabid anti-Semite with a bone to pick with Israel. She's accused the religious state of pressuring Trump to not release the files, which does make sense if you know anything about Israel's recent history, but considering how lax Israel is about stopping kitty diddlers in their own country, I kind of doubt the arguments hold that much water. Hell, their cybersecurity director, Tom Alexandrovich, was caught in a child predation sting while taking part in the Black Hat Hacker Cybersecurity Convention in Las Vegas back in August, before being quietly unarrested and allowed to return to Israel under his own power. I even did a story on that as part of like the 2nd or 3rd Muttday. But yes, MDG totally apologized for taking part in the same toxic rhetoric Trump now uses against her because she is under threat. Not because she in any way is contrite or regrets causing active harm to the minorities that she constantly attacks. She just doesn't like feeling it herself. She hasn't said she won't do it again, and hasn't ceased making baseless and inflammatory claims, being a transphobic weasel, or done anything to indicate contrition or that she's improved as a person, but she said the word sorry while in a public slap fight with Trump, and that's keeping her in the news, so of course the Dems are already clamoring to open the big tent and let her in, so long as they can keep all the scary minorities they expect to vote for them unquestioningly out. And since we're talking about asinine political moves, I haven't had a chance to cast my net beyond the US in a minute, so let's mention the general implosion of the technically still unnamed UK party, headed, at least in theory, by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, better known as Your Party. I say in theory because they've already been in like 3 incredibly public bickering matches over the direction of the party and its launch, and all of those have been about cutting the lefty legs out from under the org before it even launched. So, they've snapped up MPs with storied histories of transphobia, and heck, one of them actually still opposes gay marriage. While Zara Sultana continues to act as though a push for trans rights is codified into the party's platform, it isn't, because Corbyn keeps demanding that people be able to vote on what the party's policies are, that being the whole Your Party thing. The men of the party, who keep releasing statements without the co-founder's signature, also continue having members throwing slurs at trans women the world over, as recently as Thursday, when MP Iqbal Mohammed did exactly that on X. He did so while also proclaiming they stand to defend the rights women lost to basic trans inclusion. He was, of course, unable or unwilling, since none exist, to name those rights that he and TERFs like him have conjured to claim we stole them somehow, but sure, whatever. Not that Zoltana herself is without issue, having repeatedly used AI-generated images instead of hiring human artists. Again, as recently as November 14th, she warned against the unnamed party becoming a sexist boys club. But surprising no one who has eyes and or ears, when you add a bunch of sexist homophobic men, largely based off their pro-Palestine stance and nothing else, yeah, you get a party that's made up of a sexist boys club. Of course, the nominally left, but actually quite hard right party currently in control of the British government isn't doing much better. Labour has been pushing themselves as reform light, which is to say they're more left-leaning than the folks who want to copy the Nazis, because Labour is only copying Trump, who's copying the Nazis who copied American fascists, but whatever. Like in the US, it's not exactly been a winning message, so they have a new plan, and it's to copy the Nazis. Oops. Yeah, early this morning for us Yanks, Alex Norris, a minister for the Home Office, charitably comparable to the US's Department of Homeland Security, speaking for the Home Sec, Shabana Mahmood, announced plans to steal jewelry from asylum seekers. The UK government tried to draw comparisons to Denmark's policy as the inspiration, though why you'd want to copy a policy from the EU country that keeps forcing chat control into new legislation, I don't know, but they also didn't originate that idea. Then again, neither did the Nazis, who stole the jewelry and gold fillings from those they condemned to the concentration and death camps, but it is where the short-sighted new revivals are getting it from. The Green Party, whose primary platforms are generally not being evil to minorities and letting MPs focus on actual local concerns, have been polling better than Labour and Reform, which is part of the benefit of not having a hellish two-party system like in the US. Hey, did you realize that the BlueSky team are still being unrepentant shitwaffles? Well, they are. On November 11th, they banned author Sarah Kendzior for no cited reason until the 12th, when BlueSky Safety informed the rest of the world, though not Kendzior, that it was only a 72-hour suspension for posting Johnny Cash lyrics, which they claimed were a death threat. Oh, and the post in question was made on October 10th, because according to them, they're that backlogged. I need to stress, this isn't even one of those, ooh, she couched a death threat in a euphemism or a quote to let it sneak by, but merely a hyperbolic expression of exaggeration saying, I want to shoot the author of this article just to watch him die, a reference to the Johnny Cash song Folsom Prison Blues while posting and linking to an article on Johnny Cash. Not to be outdone, they've now also banned liberal comedian Patton Oswald for what BlueSky is also calling a death threat on November 13th. His post commenting on Megyn Kelly defending and justifying the systemic rape, abuse, and prostitution of children because some were 15 or older was obviously not a death threat, but a normal comment anyone who doesn't want to see that happen to another human being, much less children, would make. His post said simply, wood chipper, feet first. And this mutt wholeheartedly agrees. Anyone who traps children, or let's be clear, any human being, into a life of abuse and forced prostitution to serve at the whims of oligarchs, or who defends that, deserves exactly that, if not far, far worse. I have a final bummer story I intend to cover a bit more completely on Pet Play soon, but the first video game champion and arguably one of the mothers of American video game history is dying. Rebecca Berger Heineman, also one of the co-founders of Interplay, was diagnosed with adenocarcinoma in late September and started a GoFundMe to help cover the costs USian healthcare say are somehow optional. Sadly, last night, Mrs. Heineman was told all further treatments are pointless. In an update to her GoFundMe, she posted, "So please donate so my kids can create a funeral worthy of my keyboard. Pixel Breaker." The GoFundMe is still up, and at time of recording, Mrs. Heineman is still with us, but it's unclear how much longer. While I suppose it's good another elder trans woman survived long enough to pass in a hospital bed rather than at the hands of bigots, it's hard to find that brighter side, as we lost her wife, Janelle Jaquez, another foundational game designer and artist, last year. Like Star Trek and so many nerdy passions before it, gaming has always been full of women, cis and trans. And we owe it to ourselves and the future to not let their work be forgotten. The Poisoned Lilies Toxic Yuri Bundle crossed its third goal, and it's still going for the rest of the month, so there's still plenty of time. $15 for 24 stories of toxic lesbians, mostly written by trans women and, well, lesbians. Last week, I managed to finally plow through A Quiet Universe, and wow, I was not prepared for some of those hits. It's a proper sci-fi horror. Kay Atkinson is constantly playing with what you think is real so well that you really grasp how untethered Sarah starts to feel from the world because you have just as little footing on what is real or false as she does. And Kennel Me, the way her dysphoria, not just gender dysphoria, mind you, is conveyed is gloriously, disgustingly beautiful. I'm not sure how she pulls it off, but every time I could see a twist coming, they somehow landed harder for having predicted them. Oh, and that dedication is something. Read it before and read it again after the book. It hits different. That's all I'll say. And then I dove headfirst into the sequel, A Sea of Silence. I made it a ways in before a scene actually just made me need a break, which I do mean as a compliment. Again, legit good sci-fi horror here. Then I got to about 50% or so before Full Bloom came out and ate my brain. Either way, I'm already throwing both of them into my recommendation pile with The Grafting of Persephone and Ranked Competitive Breast Growth also from the bundle. Actually, one quick thing. Sarah Zed skeeted about reading Ranked Competitive Breast Growth last night, and oh my dog, please let this be the thing that lets this monster escape containment. I need people to understand what I mean when I say Sorceress, Makula from Full Bloom, and Perils of Polymbius is literally just Kathy from Ranked Competitive Breast Growth once she's out of the competition and no longer pretending to be a man, pretending to be a trans girl. I've got 2 stories left for you this week, and since one of them is obviously going to be the promised review of Magica Riot Full Bloom, this is the other one! Last week, I reported briefly on Patreon and Ko-fi shutting down the accounts of Anna Valens, giantess vor VTuber, and longtime games journalist covering Not Safe for Work and queer spaces, whom I often reference on this show. In fact, I think I've referenced her probably in at least 50% of my episodes. It turned out the hit was due to 2 of her Not Safe for Work ASMR audios for, in this mutt's opinion, at best spurious and weird justification, which only grew shakier when Ms. Valens lost her Ko-fi account, despite keeping all 18+ work off that platform. Though, I will say, Ko-fi has been known to search beyond the limits of their site when they want to. Her Patreon is back up after deleting the 2 audios, but one has also been pulled from Pornhub of all places. Yes, one of the same 2 for incest. Actually, this is almost funny. Apparently, mommydom content isn't allowed on Pornhub unless you say it's step, or if the examples that I'll be throwing up in the edited version here are to be believed, if you're doing it while straight. Apparently, just saying the words mommy and baby girl make it incest, at least if you're trans, or they're both girls. Not that I'm gonna let it go there. Mommy, daddy, and baby are literally the most common bedroom pet names in the country. I'm sorry, USA. You have an incest kink. It's okay. The whole point of kinks and pornography is to explore things in a safer way through the lens of fiction and pretend. The less fun part about this story is that Miss Valens seems to have revealed 2 other ongoing stories. First, a rather sudden deplatforming wave hitting VTubers who use coffee as well as at least one model maker. This coincides with MasterCard's launching of its new MasterCard Threat Intelligence, an AI tool, obviously, which, per my reading, would actually be illegal in the state of Colorado when our AI regulation bill goes into effect. If only Governor Polis hadn't delayed it after signing it, it actually would be in effect right now. Given the grand name and the fact that you're clearly conscious in the year 2025, I think you'll rightly assume it's a regurgitative AI that claims to prevent fraud, mostly with more proactive declines, demands that you verify transactions, and by determining without human input what transactions count as high risk. See, I was going to speculate a bit and say it seems like this Azathoth ex machina may have labeled VTubers, or Miss Valens specifically, as inherently high risk and just happened to hit the other VTubers as well, or they were flagged for similar but dissociated reasons. But then Miss Valens had a fun addition to this story. She has a throne, a digital wish list which includes crowdfunding gifts like paying for intangibles like lunch or rent. Despite some claims, that is allowed on Throne, and Miss Valens even has express permission for it. However, a friend of hers tried to donate to one of those and got a fraud alert from Bank of America to confirm the payment to, quote, Giantess Vortuber Anna Valens. It's rather notable that neither the term giantess nor Vortuber actually appear on her throne page. In fact, Miss Valens did some investigating, so I didn't have to, yay, and discovered that MTI was built off of cyber threat intelligence made by Recorded Future, who MasterCard acquired late last year. Do you want to guess who was an early client of Recorded Future's cybersecurity chatbot before it got its new name? Actually, there were a lot of them. There's something like 30 different government bodies, and about half the Fortune 500 companies use it, but Bank of America was one of the first. Remember, stoppaypros.neocities.org, link in the description, to learn how you can fight back against this crap. Porn is worth defending. Actually, late-breaking update as of 6 a.m. MST, before it even launched, Miss Valens' Buy Me a Coffee, not to be confused with Coffee, K-O-F-I, has already been suspended. This looks to be for the same reason as the other coffee hit, namely because she did NSFW work elsewhere, as they told her, quote, it is required to deactivate accounts that contain or use adult content to generate revenue through Buy Me a Coffee. Except that she wasn't doing any of that on or through Buy Me a Coffee since, the account wasn't up and running yet. Like the other coffee site, Miss Valens had no adult content on the site, nor any indication she did adult content, lending credence to the fact that she, or potentially VTubers in general, have been flagged by this Azathoth ex machina. It's still the best term for the damn things. I need to stress, this is literally financial institutions declaring a journalist and entertainer high risk and functionally debanking her for existing as a queer trans woman who isn't ashamed of sexuality. I shouldn't have to tell you to care about other people, but if for some reason I do, what's stopping them from doing this to you? You might not be a trans girl or even queer, but are you sure you've never done anything or bought anything MasterCard and Visa have decided, or may in the future decide, you shouldn't have with your own damn money? As I wrote on February 18th, first they came for the trans women, and you didn't speak out. because they're just asking questions. They want trans people and women safe. Then they came for the sex workers, and you didn't speak out, because they're being exploited against their will, no matter what they say for themselves. Then they came for the immigrants, and you didn't speak out, because those are American jobs, and you deserve them. Well, someone else does. They sound hard. I hope you see a happier ending to this poem than I do, but then, I'm a trans woman. Reminder that the original First They Came poem is often censored to remove the first group, and further, ignores the actual first targets of the Nazis, the disabled and the queers. About 1/3 of those queers were turned in by their own families, by the way. Oh, and the poet Martin Niemöller didn't not speak out. He was a Nazi. He materially benefited from the fascist state and wrote the poem to whitewash his reputation, as many Nazis did, as it was clear they'd lost the war. Which is also why he left out the disabled and queers he knew his audience wouldn't care about. Anyway, now we can talk about the slightly fun stuff. Ha! I tricked you. I actually have 2 full bloom stories. The first one is actually just a straight-up celebration of queer joy, though. Despite the surprise earlier-than-expected release in its first weekend, Magica Riot Full Bloom, the Passion Project sequel self-published by Kara Buchanan, has already sold 300 copies. Just in case you need a reminder that there are people out there who want gay, trans shit, y'all. Someone remind me of that the next time I can rub 2 hours together to work on my Toxic Chef Magical Girl duo novel. Remember to support the Patreon if you want me to have the time to do that, or support it and demand that I write something else. That probably won't work, but I am more likely to listen if you're actually paying me. And then the Magica Riot Full Bloom review that I promised. Read it. Unless you haven't read the first book. In which case, read that, then read Magica Riot Full Bloom. No, really, I don't know what you're expecting from me. Kara has often compared her work rather fairly to the anime that helped inspire her. She wrote Magica Riot with the idea of it being the pilot episode or the first few of a new magical girl anime. Her novella, Jade Evergreen and the Perils of Polymbius, was supposed to feel like popping into the second or third episode of a more episodic 80s magical girl show. And they both hit the nail squarely on the head. She said she was aiming for Full Bloom to be more of her Sailor Moon S, a fan favorite arc with a bunch of big emotions, multiple big baddies, butting heads, and really getting to see everyone be their gayest selves. Well, she did it. Perfectly. I'm gonna try and sneak by with as few spoilers as I can, but it's really good, I promise. Everything around Bloom, the character, is great. She manages to be a quippy character who I don't want to punt through the nearest wall, because that's not all she has going on. Kara has mastered the surgically placed quip, far superior to the belt-fed shotgun approach popularized by Joss Whedon and Claptrap. Not that Bloom is the only one who gets away with it, but she just speaks so differently from everyone else. Her quips are lent a bit of extra oomph. Ooh, and I love how shamelessly horny it is. No one pretends they can't see how attractive other people are just because they're in a relationship. Not only is there no shame, Hazel, my darling Hazel, the only character I identify with more than Bloom, literally encourages other girls to flirt with and fluster her girlfriend. It's the best. As for the actual narrative, it wags. It wags, y'all. The side, Kara was very committed to the musical motif. Structure really lets each side feel like a mini episode while still flowing with the arc plot. It helps bring more weight to the passage of time we don't necessarily see on the page. One thing I have to bring up, I love that at no point is Allison Webb, one of the 2 overarching villains, outright stated to be a chaser, but those vibes ooze off her every word without it ever needing to be said. Good on you, Kara. I hate that you did that, but damn, you did it well. I'm always hesitant to use queer joy as a selling point. So often it means, well, either ignoring actual systemic issues, or it means a narrative and story so smooth and edgeless it would make a great ball bearing, but not an enjoyable or engaging piece of fiction. But Full Bloom is queer joy. It's queer joy that understands you can't have that queer joy without loss, without having to know why it's worth fighting for. I want to call it childish if that didn't have such a derisive connotation. It has that energy you normally only see in kids the first time they find out a system isn't fair, and they get intuitively that we should change it so it is fair. It's the kind of energy I wish I could bring to bear against all the world's problems. Full Bloom, like Magica Riot before it, is exactly what I needed in this moment and didn't know. I'm only sad my physical copy isn't here yet, so any bookshots I use will have to be screenshots. Oops. Let's see, does this remember that I have filters attached to it? It does. Let's see if it remembers them. It did! Oh, it never does that. Okay, so, quick rundown of the schedule. For those of you who have not been here, this is generally how I try and do most of them. Obviously, 8 a.m. MST was the beginning of Muttday. Oh, that still says 14. I have to change that. Movie night tonight is going to be Dragon Pilot. If you haven't seen it, it's actually a show on Netflix, and I wasn't kidding when I said it is very much dragon mecha vor anime. We'll be watching the dub because I can't do subs. I'm sorry. I will not have... Yes, it's soft vor. It's, I can't remember what the term for when they're not technically digested, but they also are getting digested because their suits slowly get eaten away. Not in a horny way, to be clear. It's kind of weird that they manage that without it feeling horny in the slightest. Yeah, that'll be at 6 p.m. MST is when we start, so if you want to join the Discord, please feel free to. Tomorrow I will probably be spending a bunch of time getting Muttday turned into shorts because it's the best way to advertise on YouTube, unfortunately, as well as working on the pet play script. Unfortunately, doing both of those together in one day means that only the shorts will really get done consistently, but hey. Then PvE Tarkov Wednesday night with Far Too Much Weed so that I stay sane. Either PvE, we might actually do PvP, we'll see. Thursday and Friday are both going to be up in the air about what I'm doing. Oh, right. Yeah. Also need to remember that Tarkov wipes are a thing. And that right now, if you are watching Tarkov streamers, you can just get a bunch of free stuff. Especially if you're new to Tarkov, I highly recommend it because it's not the most forgiving game. The devs kind of honk. And actually, no, one of them is just a misogynistic shithead. The head dev sucks. Don't know about the rest of them. The head dev in particular kind of sucks and also makes really bad decisions on a regular basis, but it's fine. Yeah. So the only guaranteed 2 streams are going to be 4 p.m. streams of Tarkov this week. I'm going to try and do some more, but it's going to depend entirely on how much pet play consumes my brain, because unfortunately pet play also just gets more views than Muttday Morning News. And part of that's just because I mostly cover games stuff, and games stuff just gets picked up better by YouTube, but hey... Yeah. Anyway, that's the whole spiel. You can find and support all of the crap that I do over at coffee.com/Fenn. That's PHENN, as well as patreon.com/Fenn. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, I have the other screen for this. I'm just on the wrong... Yeah, there we go. This one with the slightly broken camera. Hi. There we go. Thank you very much to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Yalk, and Rose, who's still not on there, which I also need to just tear all of this down and replace it anyway, but for supporting over on Patreon. You can find me on BlueSky at fen.gay. You can also find all of my work over at fen.gay, including all of my writing, though I need to do some more of that because it's been a minute since I got to do any that wasn't script writing, but whatever. Yeah. Discord got linked, all that good stuff. I will see you all soon. I need to go start editing this before my therapy starts in an hour and a half, joy. So I will be throwing all of you over to what is Iggy doing? How have I lost my my window that had that had Twitch open. Iggy is doing Ghosts of Yeahhhh. Yeah. I think Iggy's just doing Ghosts of Yeahhhh. Or, no, sorry, I'm trying to check and see what a couple of folks are doing, and apparently just a bunch of VTubers that I know are live right now, but because I'm not throwing to Desert Bus. Oh my god, I didn't do a story. That's what I was forgetting. I forgot to do a Desert Bus story. Oh shit, I need to write one of those in too. I knew there was something I was forgetting. I cannot believe I forgot to include Desert Bus. Hey, if you're not familiar with Desert Bus, it's a week-long charity event that's currently running right now on Twitch at twitch.tv/desertbus. I'm not going to throw to them because they don't necessarily need the support right now, but they're raising money for Child's Play charity, all while playing Desert Bus, the game where you drive at exactly 45 miles per hour from Tucson to Vegas and back in real time at a fixed speed, and the only gameplay interaction is that the bus very, very slowly lists to the right and will crash if you let it go all the way off to the right, or I guess if you stop holding down the accelerator for too long and it slows down too much. It's terrible, intentionally so, for many reasons, but the fun thing is that it's a bunch of comedians playing the game. Also, like, entertainers beyond just the group Loading Ready Run who are running it, because it's also, like, Dan Olsen was on as a guest last year, and he's on as, like, a full-time entertainer during one of the shifts this year, and he's been a fucking delight. But there's also, like, Mikey Newman, and I know at least a couple, the dude who originally started Extra Credits and got kicked out of it by James Shitgoblin. What is his name? Because he and his wife are both part of it as well. Dan, what is his last name? I want to say, I think it's Dan something. Also, like, Jordan Hopkins, who is technically, I think, what is his job for WotC? He does something for WotC, community manager. He does community management for WotC, but is also a streamer and just all-around great dude. Floyd! Dan and Carrie Floyd. They now run Playframe and Playframe Plus, but he was the original one that started Extra Credits before James, whatever his last name is, kind of took over, booted everyone out, and used it to hide his systemic abuses, as men in games keep doing. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to throw you all over to Iggy Maid because, I don't know, it seems funny. She's playing Ghost of Yote. If you haven't been over to Iggy's channel, she is a, maid iguana. I hope you all have fun. And I know nothing at all about Ghosts of Yote, so enjoy? Yeah, let's go with enjoy. Sorry, I was trying to check for pronouns because I can't remember. I feel like Iggy uses more than just she, her, but I just don't remember what. Yeah, have a great time all, and I will get this edited. Please remember that you can find all this crap that I'm doing also over at youtube.com/fenoflore, but the easiest way will just be to follow on BlueSky at fen.gay, or to go to my website, fen.gay, where I post everything aside from, like, YouTube shorts, except for the occasional ones that I want to make sure people see. Like when I had to do the update for Magica Riot getting an even earlier release date. Yeah. Bye, all. Where's the button? There's the button.